Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Matt Braden from GPAR's professional staff. Good afternoon. Hope everybody is doing well and enjoying this beautiful day. Not a bad day considering some of the chilly temps we had earlier this week that were a little bit too chilly for this time of year, if you ask me, but I'm partial to warm weather anyway. So anyway, welcome. Welcome to this afternoon's conversation. It's a very important one. Before we get involved with that and we do our introductions and get rolling with the conversation, just a few things that I have to take care of housekeeping wise. So RPAC, we have an RPAC sweepstakes going on right now. Hopefully you have received either an email from our RPAC committee chair, Chris Mattioli, or our president, Stephanie Biello. We're running a sweepstakes right now, and not one, not two, not three. I'm going to go to my other hand. We're going to go 3 winners from that sweepstakes will get 2021 dues. So not a bad incentive there to invest in RPAC. Plenty of good reasons why you should invest in RPAC. We'll hit you with that stuff down the road. But if anything else, 2021 dues for free sounds like a good opportunity to me. So anyway, keep an eye on your inbox. If you haven't received something, reach out to Summer or give us a call. Any one of our GPAR team will be happy to help you out. Upcoming coffee talk. If you have not attended a coffee talk in the past, they are really great opportunities. We usually do them 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. Sometimes we mix it up a little bit. One of those times we'll be mixing it up will be on October 13th, in which we welcome NAR President Vince Malta. He's going to be in coffee talk with our president, Stephanie Biello. It's going to be an hour of conversation about what's going on in the real estate industry. Obviously, he's going to be coming from the perspective of the national level. He's going to be talking about some of the things that have transpired during his year as president, some of the successes, some of the things that are on the horizon for the future. For the National Association and how they impact your work right here in Philadelphia. While we're speaking of NAR and October 23rd, 1 month from today, we are going to have an economic update from the one and only Lawrence Yun from NAR. He is a national voice as it relates to the economics and the real estate industry. He's all over the place. He's quoted all the time. You hear him on KYW, you see him on MSNBC, you name it. He's all over the place. He will be with us here in Philadelphia, 11 a.m. on October 23rd. So keep an eye on your inbox for that kind of stuff of logging in and all that. We'll have other coffee talks with President Stephanie. She does a great job with them. We'll have some more political guests as we get closer and closer to the election because that is super relevant at this point in time. So with that, I would like to hand it off to our president, 2020 GPAR president, Stephanie Biello. Hello, Stephanie.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Matt, and welcome, Bill, and welcome all our GPAR members. Very excited to have Bill Dedman here today to talk to us about some of his work. Just to give you a little introduction, Bill is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and best-selling author. He has worked in online news, video, newspaper, television, and magazines. He received the Pulitzer Prize in investigative reporting for The Color of Money, his series of articles in the Atlantic Journal-Constitution on racial discrimination by mortgage lenders in the middle-income Black neighborhoods. The Color of Money led to expanded federal laws on disclosure of loan data, new financing for middle-income homeowners, and the greater awareness of systemic discrimination. He also was one of the lead reporters on Newsday's critically acclaimed Long Island Divide series, a 3-year Newsday investigation that showed the evidence of widespread unequal treatment of minority home hunters on Long Island, New York. So we're happy to have Bill join us today for this very important conversation. So please welcome Bill Dedman. Hello, and welcome to Philadelphia, Bill.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So why don't we start out with some of your opening remarks?
Well,
what would you like to?
First, it's exciting to have this opportunity to share with you our Newsday team's investigation. I really appreciate these invitations from real estate associations, and it is gratifying that so many associations around the country have responded to our team's work and are using it to provoke an important conversation. So I'm hoping that we can together dive into looking at little snippets of the Newsday video of agents in action, maybe not on their best days. And more importantly, I'm hoping that we can discuss some of the implications of this investigation and maybe some of the fixes for the problem of unequal treatment in real estate. I know that as real estate professionals, you will have your own reactions and your own thoughts, and I'm hoping this will be helpful to you, but also challenging, something that you can think about and take action on. So I'm ready to go through some questions with you and to look with you at some of our video.
Okay, perfect. Before we get into that, why don't we talk to our members about who you are, where you're from, and how your career has brought you to where you are right now.
I'm 59 years old. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm a father of 3 and grandfather of 2. And I grew up in Tennessee, worked for small newspapers, went to Washington University in St. Louis. You know, I'm the son of a lawyer and a teacher, so maybe there's a lot of talking in the family. But I started early on as a newspaper reporter. Most of my background is in newspaper, and often in stories that relate to racial issues, and often looking for different ways to get at what's happening. That might mean public records work. Sometimes it's meant undercover investigations like this. But often trying to get beyond he said, she said sort of reporting at the surface.
Okay. So you won the Pulitzer Prize for an investigation into mortgage lending practices. I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to hear a brief summary of that, that investigation, how long it was, and the breadth of it.
My son was 5 at the time, and he misheard. He was very upset because he thought we'd won the Publishers Clearinghouse. He hadn't heard of the Pulitzer. The stories in Atlanta were called The Color of Money, and it was really an old story, redlining, which had been going on under government offices since the 1930s, then had ended, or it all thought that it had ended essentially in the 60s. With the fair housing laws. But what we found was that banks in Atlanta especially, but the savings and loan associations as well, were lending money in white parts of Atlanta, but even the poorer white neighborhoods, but were not lending money in any of the African-American parts of that heavily segregated city. Even the neighborhoods where Coretta Scott King and Andrew Young and the CEOs from Delta and Coca-Cola lived. And so that was the basis of it. It was built on public records, took about 6 months. And we used records of lenders report where they get applications and how they act on them. So it was based on federal records that were self-reported by the lenders. There we had public records to work with. A later investigation that I worked on in Boston is similar to that. We looked at traffic tickets and who gets a warning and who gets a break, who gets a ticket, who gets a warning when the officer's standing at your window and lets it admit you were speeding. And we found that there was a huge difference in terms of race and sex and age predicting who gets the ticket. Young women got a warning, tended to get a warning until they got to about age 40. It's the same as who gets drinks bought for them in a bar. And the minority men, Black and Hispanic men, very rarely got warnings. And one thing that I think, again, based on public records, work. But one thing that showed me was that work on profiling, so to speak, really helps you get at what no one in the interaction may be aware of. The officer may not know that he's treating different people differently. It may be unintentional. And the people who get the tickets or the warnings certainly may not know. They would have no way of knowing how the other customer, in that case, was treated. And that's quite similar to the work that we've done with homeowners, because the person being treated better or worse would have no way to know.
Okay, so the investigation has become the most prominent example of the existence of race-based bias in real estate. So why did Newsday start the investigation in the beginning?
Well, first, it's important to realize that Long Island, which many of you are familiar with, stretches east of New York City, has 3 million people in more than 200 communities. Long Island is a heavily segregated suburb. And what we mean by that is that although there's diversity overall, people from many nationalities and colors, what we don't have on Long Island is diversity inside the communities. School districts and communities are very heavily one way or another. And for example, most of the African Americans on Long Island, middle income or wealthy, are in only 8 of those 200 plus communities. So there's this background of segregation. Then also we heard over a long period of time even from our own staff, anecdotal descriptions of discrimination by sellers, by their agents. It's the sort of thing where an integrated couple learns after a while not to take the person of color in the couple home shopping, but to show up at the closing. So we'd heard these stories and we wanted to know if this was still going on. We're suckers for anniversary stories, and I have to mention that we had noted that the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act was coming up. So we wanted to know, was that sort of thing still happening? Now, what we added to the traditional testing methods that fair housing groups use was the hidden camera to collect audio and video. That's legal in New York, and it's legal in most states, not legal in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the states that where hidden collection of audio is allowed only if both parties to the conversation consent to it. But testing can still happen in any state. But in our case, we were doing the testing with video. Let me show you a clip. The problem that's highlighted in this first video clip is what we spoke of as a barrier to entry. That is a failure to serve. The African-American client got no service from the agent, even though she was in exactly the same circumstance as the white customer. Let's show you this first clip.
I'm a law professor at the University of Kentucky, and I've been a law professor for a long number of years. All we're asking in these tests, you get 2 people who come in and ask for exactly the same thing. Why don't you give them the same listing? Why don't you pre-qualify them in exactly the same way? It's not that big a burden. This is a law. This should be treated like a tax law or any other law. You have to obey this law, and particularly if you're in a license.
Do you have clip 1 and 2 intro?
Yeah.
If not, I can play it for you.
Yeah, go ahead, play it.
Yeah, I'll play it for you. Here we go. Just take me a second.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
I'm going to share a screen with you just a moment.
How do you know that they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different?
Well, I'm not. I don't have screen sharing rights.
Okay.
I don't have screen sharing rights.
So Bill, that video clip I was sharing was not the intro?
No, that was a later clip with the law professor. We're looking for a clip called Newsday Clip 1 and 2, Intro and Inappropriate Comments.
Yeah, that's what I thought I said. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, while we wait for that to pull up. So this one, we are looking at part of the investigation.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
So this isn't the correct video here, Bill?
We'll have to see when it starts. What's it called?
I'm a law professor at the University of Kentucky, and I've been a law professor for a long time.
Okay.
The name of the clip is Newsday Clips 1, 2.
Yeah, that's the way it's showing up for me.
Intro and Inappropriate Comments. It may be that when they were saved, something was saved over with the same title.
Okay.
Why not make Bill the host so he can show the clip
If you
himself?
make me a host, I can share. Sorry, everybody. We'll get this together quickly. Can you make me a host?
Yeah, I have you as a host.
Okay, let's see if I can share. Okay, just a moment.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. We're going to share, everybody. We're going to get this going. Don't worry. Nothing bad is going to happen.
But you don't want to go. Next neighborhood.
If agents are courteous, how can you know that they're treating you equally
Is that
compared
sharing?
with someone of a different
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
behind smiles and handshakes?
I can't tell if that's sharing.
Giving you fewer
Blank
options or
screen.
suggesting different areas.
See your menu.
Or just seeing your file, your
Yeah,
file.
hold on. We're going to try again.
Don't apply to If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're
Yes.
treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know that they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
Unless you don't want to store your car.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way. Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, you shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house. Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
That means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your when can it start?
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any and Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently.
All right, so now I want to explain to you how the testing was done.
Yeah, let's talk about do the breakdown. Who was
Yeah.
tested and what was the outcome?
So first, just what the procedure was. I think somebody needs to go on mute.
Yeah, can we mute everybody? Everybody, put yourself on mute, please.
So
Carol's
okay, I'll take that. Thanks.
Kathy Walsh, go on mute, please.
So we focused on home sales. You know, the testing can be done of renters. We focused on home sales, and we sent out first-time home buyers one at a time to see an agent. So we would send a white home buyer and separately an Asian American home buyer, or mixing up who went first, or a white and black.
The host can mute.
And it's important to notice that the testers gave the agent the same circumstances and the same constraints on their home search. I mean, they were following the same script. First-time home buyers not selling another property, so that's not a consideration. The same gender in each pair, roughly the same age, dressed in the same business casual style. We even picked out purses for the women to carry that were similar. Same geographic area, something like, 45 minutes from Penn Station or within 30 minutes of this employer. Same family size, same stated price range, same number of bedrooms, and then some things that usually weren't asked, but the same income if they were asked, and the same credit score if they were asked, and the same mortgage pre-approval status as we saw in that example. So we shopped for homes from entry level, and of course in New York area prices, that's about $400,000, up to a high end, which was $7 million in our case, but always the same for both testers. And it's important to note that they saw the same agent. Now that wouldn't really be necessary for a fair housing investigation for a lawsuit. Two different agents at the same brokerage are also supposed to treat customers the same. But we thought that it would be more persuasive and more fair to have the same agent see both clients. We would let the companies choose the agent, and then we would follow up to see that the second tester got the same agent. We did 86 of these matched pairs, and some involved multiple agents, so it was overall 93 agents. They were at 12 companies, and those are 12 companies that have more than half of the market on Long Island. More than half the sellers are represented by those 12. Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, Remax, these familiar names, but also large regional brands like Douglas Elliman. And we tested many times and multiple times at each office. We got the testers, some from church groups and friends of friends, but mostly these were out of work actors because they were available. We dressed them the same, we trained them, and we set up the video cameras. They would get listings and they would go on home tours, and then we at Newsday, as the buyers, would communicate with the agents. And then let me mention, we watched these 240 hours of videos that they'd made. And we analyzed the thousands of listings that they had gotten to see what school districts and communities and demographics there were in the census areas where they were given listings. We made sure that homes were available throughout, if you didn't get an area, were there any homes for sale in those areas? Then we gave the results to 2 experts in fair housing, a professor who wrote the textbook on fair housing, and a fair housing person who had run testing for the Justice Department. And only if both of these referees threw a flag did we count an agent as out of bounds. Then we took all this material to the agents and the brokerages. We let them come into Newsday and watch the videos before the stories were published. So we could let them give whatever responses they wanted, and then we published the maps and the videos online. Partly the point I'm making is that this was a careful effort. It took more than 3 years and was not a drive-by investigation. Now, here's what the conclusions were, the results. The agents gave unequal treatment in 40% of our tests, 4 out of 10. But the results weren't the same for each type of pair. So at the low end, for Asian American buyers, 19% of the time, Asian American buyers were treated differently from their white counterparts. So 2 out of 10 times. For Hispanic buyers, 39% of the time, 4 out of 10, Hispanic buyers were treated differently than their white buyer. And for Black buyers, 49% of the time, 5 out of 10, they were treated differently than the white counterpart. Now that Black-white difference has got most of the attention. It's the biggest number, and there's a lot going on in the country that points us to look in that direction. But let's not lose track of the rest. If half a century after the civil rights laws were passed, 2 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 Asian or Hispanic buyers are being treated differently, those are high numbers as well. We're not saying that these are the results you would get if you rolled the dice 10,000 times. But we are saying that there is substantial evidence that there's risk. If you're out shopping, there's risk of unequal treatment. And it's fair to say that these real estate companies were contributing to the racial segregation on Long Island. We're not saying they created it, but they're helping as gatekeepers to keep it in place. I think one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, would these results be substantially the same or different if we repeated them in the Philadelphia area or Houston or Los Angeles or most of the metro areas in America? Now, what caused these differences? What sort of differences? Most of it was a problem of steering. Black buyers got fewer listings the wider the area was of residents there now. Agents, in fact, in 1 out of 4 cases, our minority buyers were directed by agents to completely different school districts and communities than their white counterparts. Just the map of their listings didn't overlap with the map of the others' listings. Along with that, there were refusals to serve, as we just saw in an example, usually because of pre-approval or because an agent might require a signed contract or agreement with one buyer but not with the other. So there seemed to be a higher level of financial scrutiny or a higher level of making sure that we weren't wasting their time, maybe an assumption that minority buyers were wasting their time. The same sort of thing wasn't required of the white buyer. So those were the main differences that we encountered. There also were inappropriate comments made by agents. It's important to note that almost always these inappropriate comments were made to our white home buyers. So I'll play for you a video clip highlighting this problem of inappropriate comments. Just one moment, we'll make that work.
Matt, I think you need to make him the host again.
Yeah, I'm the host, and I'm gonna make it. It'll just take me a moment to get it to start.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for their patience as we work through those technical challenges.
Over Springs in Northwest Woods area.
Here, an agent gives conflicting advice about Freeport.
Now you have a bad school district, and that's not good for resale value.
On the school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood. It should be the United Nations.
Because you to go there at 10 o'clock at night if you weren't to buy diapers. Go to that 7-Eleven. They didn't buy there.
No, that's great.
I have to say it without saying it. You know, you have the knowledge of the areas.
Yes.
You know. I don't want to use the word steer, but I try to use the word educative areas. You know.
Yeah. How are you, Russ? Hey, Russ. Good. How are you?
We're either waiting for the owner or waiting for the agent to show up.
You don't want to be. I don't think you should be in the Almond. I think you should probably just be Franklin Square.
And I remember specifically, he talked about steering.
Yes, that's what he said. Steering, yeah.
Yeah. And in the same breath, he mentioned, well, steering's bad, but this is what I'm going to do.
There's something called steering. No steering, you know, like steering.
Oh, like a car or something?
No, like a horse, you know.
I'd like to add that the inappropriate comments that we heard are sort of easy to focus on. You know, it brings a lot of heat and attention. I have a sense that most agents may have internalized the idea that complying with the fair housing laws means not saying the wrong thing.
We've as realtors, we've learned about steering in real estate school.
Yeah, of course.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what it's meant by that term? Obviously, this guy didn't do a very good job in his video.
Well, maybe it wasn't his. Maybe it wasn't his best day. Yeah. Okay, so what is steering? Steering is sort of a catch-all term that is used to describe several different kinds of behaviors, right? So showing one person an apartment while telling another equally qualified person that there's no such apartment. Or telling one person that there's no housing in an area in your price range, you wouldn't be able to find anything there, but showing housing in that price range to others. Asking one customer for ID, making unsolicited comments about race or ethnicity or religion of the people who live in an area, or the schools, or crime or resale values as a way of encouraging or discouraging someone from looking there, while giving contrary information to someone equally qualified. We would hear agents tell one buyer, as you just saw, the poor resale values there, while telling another buyer, oh, you'd like it there. And then just giving listings in one area while not giving listings to an equally qualified person to that same area, if the difference that seems to explain it is race. Overall, our white testers also just got more listings, just got more service than their black counterparts. White buyers got 50% more listings than the black buyers, just more homes shared with them to look at. That was a very, very common difference, along with this failure to serve some people. Let me encourage you to think about it, not in terms of the two people in a pair, but think of it for a moment in terms of neighborhoods. There were neighborhoods where that are wider areas or very wide areas on Long Island. Levittown is the famous one of America's first suburbs, it's called, where the almost all the listings given to any of our buyers were given to whites. Minorities just didn't get listings in Levittown and some other areas. And so minorities were in effect shut out. We also had minority communities where no one got listings. And would you say, well, is that steering? If both testers were steered around an area? Yes, that's steering. These were the communities on Long Island with the most concentrated black population of all incomes, I want to remind you, but the agents steered around those for everyone. Now, by the way, under the fair housing law, who would have a lawsuit in that case? Who could sue those agents that steered around those areas? Well, the communities for one, and everybody who's tried to sell a home in that area, and their listing brokers would have a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act because their resale values and their commissions have been harmed. So you could think about this in terms of impact on communities, not just on individual buyers. I think it's important to keep in mind what the impacts are if companies are helping perpetuate segregation in communities, maybe not creating it. There's a book called The Color of Law. It's very much worth reading by a professor named Richard Rothstein. And he lays segregation in America at the fate of government action, like the GIs who came home from World War II, and white GIs could get a veterans or FHA loan, and black veterans could not. Others are more focused on the action of appraisers. We saw recent stories just a couple weeks ago about differences in appraisal from community to community. But either way, even if real estate agents didn't create segregation, there may be some action of reinforcing it. Let me show you a video clip with another strong example of steering, where two people were given completely different information about a community. One man warned away from living there with his family, while another man and his family are told it would be a good place to live with good people. Let me show you, let me play that for you. Take me just a second.
Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a new client, I get so excited because they're nice people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, the white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood.
Okay.
And so we found a couple that are in Brentwood.
Pretty close to each other.
Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going.
Do you want to give me them and I'll look into them for you? Or?
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white tester, saying there was concern about gang activity going on in Brentwood. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods.
Wow. Bill, do you think the agents in this documentary, do you think they were knowingly steering? I mean, we can assume, you know, from some of the statements from some of them they were, but do you think some of it is an unconscious bias?
It's a very interesting question. The first point is that it doesn't matter at all. Yeah. The Fair Housing Act and the local laws cover behavior, not thoughts or motives. We don't know anyone's motives, and not knowing your motives doesn't mean that we can't see violations of the law. The law is not a mind reader. And when agents were called recently before a state Senate committee hearing in New York, many of them testified, well, I didn't intend to discriminate, as though that was, I mean, that's good to hear, but it's not a defense on the question of whether or not they treated people differently. If you're treating one person better than another similarly situated person, and the difference between them is one of the 7 categories in the Fair Housing Act, to tick those off, color, race, religion, national origin, disability, sex, and family status, like having children or being pregnant, then you violated the law. And you also have state and local laws that may include marital status and sexual orientation. Now, I do think it's interesting to think about what the potential motivations may have been of these agents, because I think we have to acknowledge that there are motivations. Some may have wanted to keep their home communities of a certain race or ethnicity. Let me tell you what I mean. We didn't count this as a violation, but we just kept seeing this. I'll give you an example. We noticed that agents were far more likely to tell white buyers the name of the community in which the agent lives. Far more likely to say, I raised my kids in this school district, this is where I live, and to suggest that the buyer shop there. That happened more with white buyers. Maybe some greater affinity going on. One agent kept offering to find babysitting in the neighborhood for our white tester, but didn't tell the minority tester where the agent even lived. It's possible that some agents have some sort of strong prejudice or anti-minority bias, but I assume most people are of good faith, and I assume that that's a very tiny group. Some agents may in effect be profiling. That is, maybe assuming that the person of color can't really afford the homes that are in that price range, or can't really qualify for the mortgage, and will be wasting the agent's time while accepting the price range and lending qualification from the white buyer. So some agents just may think they'll make money faster with less effort if they show people homes, quote, where you'll feel comfortable. You saw an agent say something like that. In other words, if the agent sorts Latino buyers into Latino neighborhoods, maybe they'll buy faster, less work, quicker commission. Some agents also may be sort of acting out of secondary or referred bias, sort of playing to the bias they expect from sellers or sellers' neighbors who are potential customers and sellers in the future, or even from appraisers or lenders. Maybe acting out of deals more likely to go through, and I'm more likely to get more customers with some sorting of people. That's possible. But it's key to remember that none of that matters. In general, on issues of race, it is easy to apply all the heat to the question, is this person racist? Or are they saying we're racist? But it's really much more productive to apply light to the question, is what we're doing treating people the same or differently? It's what you do that counts. I keep going back to the idea that the testers were unaware that they were being treated better or worse than their counterparts. They all got the smile. They would come back time after time, both testers, and say, she was so nice. That agent was so helpful. But they only saw a difference when our team brought the two together to see the results. Let me play you a very brief clip about that. Just take me a moment.
It almost makes me wish that the racism is more explicit so that I would know about it.
Too often I hear people who maybe aren't as familiar with this kind of work say, oh, well, they were just testers. But all you have to do is tell someone, which I have to do on a fairly regular basis, that you were turned down because of your race, and tell them the circumstances that occurred on a particular test. And you will see just how real and painful that injury is.
Elmont, it's okay, it's good, you're very close to the city. Some of them are not as nice. Elmont.
I do remember him, he was nice, and I do remember him pointing out on the map.
Oh, he loved that map. I remember that.
Yeah, he had the map, and he's like,
Some of these towns, in my opinion, are not necessarily the greatest in terms of school districts, safety, crime, resale.
One of the things that startled us, like with that realtor with the map, he looked like General Patton planning the invasion of Sicily. and new customers. And the first thing he would say is, do you know anything about real estate on Long Island? And you'd say that our testers would say no. And he'd say, well, there's certain communities you want to stay away from. And then he would tick off the names of all the communities with African-American residents. In effect, telling people don't get off the Southern State Parkway till you pass exit 28. It startled us time and again that so many of the agents began their presentations to buyers, I mean, to new customers, with inappropriate comments or with information that violates the Fair Housing Act. They would write out lists of school districts, and our buyers would bring back to us the handwritten lists, but the two buyers would get a different list. So in other words, it's not just offhand casual comments or spontaneous slurs. I have to say, it seemed to be the sales pitch. In other words, it seemed to be the starting point of narrowing the search. I don't think it's going too far to say that with those agents, I hate to say it, but steering seemed to be the service that they were selling.
So yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I just wanted to ask you, so what role did the schools play in the actions of the agents? Did they talk about schools?
Yes. You know, you know the background that American school districts are so segregated by race and ethnicity in many communities, and that's certainly the case in Long Island. So directing someone to a certain school district is the same as directing them to an area with high or low minority population, even if nothing is said about race. And it seemed routine for agents to do this. Often agents would say, everything is done by schools. That's where the MLS screen would start from when you're picking what listings to share. It starts with picking school districts. They would talk down one district as declining, another would be a blue ribbon. Now, in fair housing training, some agents may have gotten the idea that they can't talk about schools at all. We heard agents say, oh, you know, they're trying to stay within the law, and they would say, I can't mention schools. Our experts point out that the Fair Housing Act doesn't say that. You can give straightforward, factual information, or answer questions, or refer clients to websites with information. The issue arises when the agents are picking and choosing different districts for different clients, or making comments about the demographics in schools, or steering everyone around districts that have minority populations. Even a relatively low minority population seems to be enough to knock them out of consideration. So here's a discussion about that with the expert is the fair housing professor who wrote the textbook on fair housing law. This is trying to clarify some of this guidance about schools.
Mm-hmm.
Going to Amityville School District?
We're trying to stay away from Freeport, Roosevelt, Hempstead for now because of the school district.
This part, the Salisbury part, is in demand because the schools are much, much, much better.
In Newsday's 86-pair tests, agents often applied a laser-like focus on school districts, highlighting their perceived quality when recommending places that house hunters should consider buying or avoid. Fair housing experts say touting or disparaging school districts can put agents in jeopardy because talking about school districts can be taken as a euphemism for race.
There's a few districts that I know I would I won't look in those towns.
Oh, okay.
You know, like Freeport and Baldwin and Amityville, which is part of Massapequa schools, but it's just certain parts of Massapequa.
If the customer asked about the quality of the schools and the agent responded with accurate information, I think the agent would be fine. The problem with talking about differentials in schools is that at least in the last 10 or 15 years, that has been a proxy for race. They don't mention the race of the community. Good schools are available in these areas. those areas I'd stay away from because they have poor schools. I want to ask, did you tell that to the other tester? If you're only giving that information to one tester of the two, and the only difference is the race, then you've provided what I call differential service.
If you're in Massapequa, you only want school district 23. Okay. You don't want 6 in Massapequa because that takes in Amityville, and you were not going to like those schools.
I think our experts made this statement that you have to ask yourself, when did agents become experts on schools and their test scores and music programs and all the needs and wants that buyers have? It seems to be the main mechanism of steering. So you have to ask yourself, is that really something that sort of fire I want to play with?
Cool. All right, I just want to make a note here, guys. If you have questions, put them in the chat box here. We have a few more questions. I want to ask Bill to show us a few more clips. So just bear with us and we'll get to those questions soon. So Bill, what was the reaction from the real estate industry?
So in brief, a lot of anger and upset. For example, this past week, agents were called in New York before this state Senate hearing. So agents and their brokers, we were watching on a video like this, but they're having to be sworn in at the beginning. Essentially the brokerages said, we've reviewed all these cases and we don't find in any case that anyone needed to be disciplined. We don't see anybody broke the law. That was the blanket answer from all the companies. The state senators were incredulous. One fellow you heard say the Hispanics have moved in and taken over this area. He said, well, I meant that in a positive way. And one of the state senators said to him, well, on behalf of everyone with a brain, I'd like to tell you how ridiculous that sounds. And there definitely is going to be more enforcement in New York State and probably elsewhere. Investigations will continue of those agents and the brokerages. Also, we're seeing different changes in the training. Our reporters went to the training by the Long Island Board of Realtors and others and saw that the steering was rarely mentioned. There was a lot of joking. There wasn't much staying on the curriculum. And the curriculum seemed pretty poor to the experts that we shared it with. So they stopped their training and they're rewriting the curriculum and getting new trainers. So that may be helpful. I also think we will see more testing done after the pandemic, I guess, by media companies and maybe by companies doing self-testing. Also, HUD has an enforcement division. Fair housing has not been a priority of this administration, but its enforcement division is talking about increasing its efforts, doing more testing, and it's under some pressure to do that from members of Congress. Also, the National Association of REALTORS has announced some new training for agents and for brokers. So I suspect that that's where, in the long run, not through more testing and maybe some more enforcement, but probably through better training is where we'll see in the long run the changes.
Yeah, I do know that NAR is coming out with some courses for the brokers. We at GPAR are also looking into those videos, and so we have some things on the books for us at GPAR. So my next question is, you may not have the answer to this question, but based on your investigation, what do you think are the best ways to combat racism in real estate?
As we were like air traffic controllers sending out these testers, and they'd come back and we'd watch their videos, and we kept asking ourselves, well, wouldn't it be so easy to stop doing what we're investigating? We were actually, it's like you're reporting on the story, you're afraid that the story will go away. They're going to stop this any day, but they didn't. And one thing it struck us was that brokerages need to have more rigorous standards for what they do with every client. if I give this client this brochure on the school districts, then I give it to everyone. Time and again, we saw our testers come back with different materials from the same agent. One would have the fat folder and one would have the skinny folder. That seems like something you can fix in an office. Require pre-approval from everyone or no one. Ask a credit score, an ID from everyone or no one. If people are applying these sorts of filters and scrutiny ad hoc, you're going to get discrimination. One of the law professors you saw, Bob Schwim, you know, his word on it, we don't need to play the clip, but just briefly, his word on it was, you know, we're not really asking anything that's that difficult. Just treat people the same. The first fix that managers seem to come up with is the idea that, well, we respond forcefully to all complaints. But you know enough about this to know that no one would know they're being steered. So how would they know? There will be no complaints. But let's talk about some fixes that might actually have some force, so might help. But maybe they're not complete, they're not cure-alls, but they're things that could help. One is diversifying your workforce, right? Has benefits. More people of different types working in the same office together. Now, not a cure-all. We saw steering by agents of all colors. Just as there can be police brutality by some officers of all colors. But having a more diverse workforce might help. You could also see benefit for having offices in minority areas. We noted that our 12 companies on Long Island had more than 200 branch offices, and not a single one of them was in these 8 communities where most of the African-American residents of Long Island live. A big difference in just demographics of where the offices are located. They could also represent more sellers in those communities, and therefore the agents would know those neighborhoods better. We talked with brokers who sold homes for years in minority communities, usually not with the big brands, but with like smaller independent companies. And they said, oh no, the big companies never send us a buyer. I can't recall a buyer ever coming here sent by one of their agents. You would think that training would help. New York already had required fair housing training, but as I mentioned, the training was awfully skimpy, and you know, it was all about what the categories are and who's covered and what year this law was passed. And don't say the wrong thing. Very little mention of steering, and just that it's you know, can happen based on what listings you hand out. Let me go back for a moment to the stories I did long ago about police officers and who gets a warning and who gets a ticket. Just let's suppose this Zoom group here was a task force to solve that problem. How long would we have to meet to stop the problem that some people get a warning and some don't? I think that's a 5-minute meeting. What's the fix? Give everybody a ticket. Sorry, but that's not my favorite fix, but that would fix it. They pull you over for speeding and you get a ticket. Not based on whether the officer thinks you have a good attitude or not, or whether you say the right thing for that officer's mood that day. You're speeding, going 12 over, you get a ticket for 12 over. That would fix it. I have to say as a layman that if someone wants to be within 20 minutes of this workplace or 45 minutes of that center city, and they want 3 bedrooms and they can spend up to X $1,000, if you shared with them all the listings that meet those criteria, share with them through your system all of those, a lot of the illegal steering would go away if agents weren't picking and choosing neighborhoods. If you weren't steering at all, you wouldn't have illegal steering. That you'll have your own take on it, but I'll have to say that's what I was seeing, having those testers come back. Why don't they stop this? As a layman, that's what looked like an effective mechanism for me to at least talk about. So I would say worry less about who's biased in our office. Focus more on equal treatment for every customer who calls or emails or comes into our into our office, because I know that you all want to treat people fairly. So what I urge you to do is to think, what steps could we take in a business where people work independently out of their SUV and some are self-employed? It's hard. What steps could we take to make sure that people who come into our office, whichever agent they get, are going to be treated equally?
All right, guys, I see we have quite a few questions in here and comments, but before I'm going to have...
Will you pick and choose them for me?
I will. I think Matt's going to go through there. I've been focused on you. He's on the chat with the questions, but so we're going to get through this. But I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join us. This has been enlightening. I'm definitely going to go back and take a look at the video. And to all the GPAR members out there, keep an eye out for some more classes, seminars. We have a great diversity committee that is working on some really good stuff. So thank you again. And I'm going to give it to Matt if he wants to start with the questions. I think we have a few minutes left. If you have time, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Okay, so one last thing I forgot to mention at the top of the program was that thank you very much to the National Association of REALTORs. They were very helpful in connecting us with Bill and having this opportunity to have this conversation today. So thank you to NAR for connecting us with Bill, and thanks, Bill, again for giving us some time today. So one of the recurring themes that seems to be within our group chat here is about punishment, and was there any kind of punishment for any of the agents on those videos or their brokers? Is anything in the pipeline for those agents to be punished and or those brokers? If so, what is the punishment? And if not, why not having some punishment?
You know, the short answer is not yet. The agents were not punished, we were told, by their brokerages. The state is still investigating. There's an investigation run by the state attorney general and also an investigation under the governor's office. We'll see what happens. It was not our focus. Remember, we just tested each agent with a single pair of testers. And if you were a fair housing group suing a company or an agent or a landlord, you would send in, you'd be doing multiple pairs. It would make a better enforcement action. But we were focused on the companies where we did multiple tests of the companies. We weren't focused on individual agents. So getting some enforcement action of they lose their license was not our goal. Our goal was to raise awareness that this was going on. So it would not surprise me if some of the agents, and some of them didn't help themselves. The agent you saw saying, I urge the mothers follow the school bus and look at the people waiting for the school bus to learn about a community, was asked, well, why did you tell people? What was the point of that advice, to look at the mothers waiting for the school bus? And she said, well, I just wanted people to know where the bus routes were. You know, if there's an investigation and that's the best she can come up with, she might be in some trouble. So, you know, we'll see how that works out for the individual agents.
What about the brokers? Was there any blowback against the brokers?
Well, again, there may be. You know, brokers, one thing that astonished me is a broker would say, oh yes, I have 800, you know, Douglas Elliman's broker on Long Island has 800 agents working under her license. You know, I know they have managers, a chain of management, but it's hard to see how one person can supervise 800 people. We'll see whether the state takes action against the brokers. I won't predict it. It wouldn't surprise me if it did happen.
Is there any way for the commission there, I'm using our language here in Pennsylvania, the real estate commission, or whatever the equivalent there is in New York, to use the evidence that your folks procured? Can that be used against any of those agents, or is that inadmissible?
No, that's admissible, and we put the videos up online, so they don't have to subpoena us for it. They could just go watch the full, you know, so the full video of the interaction between this tester and that agent is online. In other words, it's not just little snippets here and there, and the agents could say, oh, it was taken out of context. Well, an investigator could see the context.
So another kind of running theme here in the chat was anyone can tell from that area from Long Island that there was definitely speak of code, and that perhaps the folks are getting a little bit of a pass, like trying to explain away what was being said or trying to like rationalize what was being said. What's a response to that?
Well, there is a lot of talking in code. That's true. All the agents appearing before the state, Senate hearing emphasized we didn't intend to discriminate, and they would also say, and my agent, in most cases they would say, my agent didn't say anything about race. That was like a scripted part of the answer that the brokers and the agents would say at the hearings. I didn't mention race at all. It was as though, well, I mean, I could see that if they had, that'd be evidence against them. But the absence of saying something about race doesn't mean it's not a violation of the Fair Housing Act. Again, there's this idea that the focus is on what people say. And I understand that you're watching videos of people talking, so I can see how we're sort of leading you back to that. But the steering's happening in what listings you give. It's not happening in what comments you make.
Okay. So the initial series was published back in November of last year.
Yes.
What kind of follow-up has happened since then with Newsday, and what are you guys doing to keep tabs on what's going on?
I think just covering the investigations and the actions that have happened. I've been interested that NAR has put out, has responded so vigorously. NAR's got a new program. They had a new fair housing person that came on. Brian Green became the new director of NAR's fair housing action efforts. He came from HUD 2 weeks before our story came out. Welcome to the new job, Brian. And they've come out with a program called ACT, A-C-T. And A is for accountability. And it's interesting, one thing they're doing under accountability is they're talking to state associations about what your laws are. So think about that. That's NAR talking to the state associations to make sure that there's accountability and enforcement of fair housing laws built into how your commission or your state Department of State, whichever organization it is, handles licensing and training requirements, et cetera. So there's some accountability effort. I thought of the most important thing that might have happened is that the CEO of Realogy, the company that has several of the large brands, came and testified to the commission that he's in favor of having self-testing of real estate agents. That is, having the company test its own agents to see if they're complying with the Fair Housing Act. Now, you could be skeptical and note that often companies that don't want to be regulated will offer to regulate themselves as a halfway measure. But it's something, isn't it? So he said, we want to test our own agents. And these wouldn't be public, but they could be something they could act on and fire agents or let them go. The NAR is trying to help that effort by making a sort of a cookbook, a how-to recipe of how to do training, what to consider, what equipment do you need, what are the pitfalls, and what are the techniques that fair housing groups and Newsday and others use, what choices would you make? And they're going to provide that cookbook to the companies, so the companies, if they choose, can test their agents. So, okay, ACT. Accountability. C is culture change, and they're sharing a lot of videos, and they're doing most of that effort, I think, will come around schools. And schools are hard. I'll give you one example. The usual advice is it's okay to refer people to websites that have unbiased information. That you're not violating the Fair Housing Act if you do that. But NAR is aware that there's a lot of bias built into the websites. For example, Great Schools ranks school districts in New York on test scores, and only on test scores. And test scores perpetuate segregation. Test scores align very closely with income. So if you just say that's a good school and that's not a good school, that's perpetuating a difference that has a long history in race and ethnicity. So NAR is trying to figure out, well, how do we get at a suggestion for agents that they could use that doesn't fall into that kind of pitfall? So that's part of what they're going to work on. The last part, ACT, T is for training, and they're increasing training available, videos to train brokers, and that sort of thing. And so I think long run, that effort by NAR to take on accountability, culture change, and training may be the biggest result that comes out of this, not the small bore immediate question of, do the agents involved lose their licenses?
So we're going to wrap up real quick. There was a comment in there about punishment from GPAR as it relates to these things. GPAR doesn't administer punishment. It's very important to recognize that. Do we go ahead and facilitate things that happen with the code of ethics and set up the mechanism by which we go ahead and hear those cases and facilitate those cases? Absolutely. It's very important to note that President Bill Festa from PAR noted in the chat the position of the Pennsylvania Association, in which they went ahead and they advocated for at the next, remember we just ended the education renewal cycle, and remember there's always a section that's mandatory, and then you have other credits that are for up to your discretion. PAR advocated that fair housing be the mandatory section, as well as GPAR reached out to the PAR to go ahead and say, hey, look, we would like for that to be included. So that was from the leadership here on the local level. I think it's really important for us to recognize what we're able to do. Our diversity committee is highly engaged and trying to go ahead and advance things, as well as our leadership. Not here to go ahead and say that we're perfect and we're hitting everything, but there is a absolute commitment to this. We're very appreciative of Anastasia Dewan leading that committee with Annette and some of our other folks who have Roderick Walker. We have some really great folks who are at the table, who are pushing hard on a lot of things, and we're trying to do those things. Like I said before, it's not perfect, but we are going to keep working, keeping our head down and working and pushing forward. And we have some really great past presidents who are also highly engaged with these issues as well. So it's not just the current day president, it's our past presidents and other leaders from the association. So the commitment is fully there. Opportunities like this, where we're able to engage, have these conversations that are hard. You look at some of the things that are in the chat, there's some honesty there that is, it's good to see that. It's good to hear that. That's what we need more of. And also too, some of the names that I'm seeing in this chat, I haven't seen some of those folks at some of our different events. So it's great to see that we're having engagement with different people from within the membership, not just here with this conversation, but across the entire pandemic. It's been really great to connect with so many different folks. So with that, I think a past president, Heather, asked to be indulged to make a quick little comment. So Heather Petronshuk, the floor is yours.
Bill, I want to thank you from a CE standpoint. I have used your video. I have watched the video number of times, and I've showed it in practically every CE class that I did this cycle to bring home and bring light to that this is a reality. And one of the most powerful parts was when you sat down the two testers next to each other. And one of my favorite testers is Johnny May. She's one of my favorite.
Use a pistol.
I like her. She got moxie. But when they sat down next to each other and she pulled up, she said, I would never have known. I never know, how are you supposed to know that I was treated any different? And if you have not watched this video in full, I thank Newsday. I thank whoever sponsored Newsday to keep that public so that it could be there, for everyone to watch and view. And I think this is big. This is big.
I appreciate that. Just to remind people, the address is newsday.com/divided. So that's an open site that has all the stories and the 40-minute video. and the maps and the cases and the lists of tests, but it's newsday.com/divided. You can, share that on Facebook or share it with your friends. I'd like to keep the conversation going around it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something, definitely share it. Because as Johnny May said, everybody wants a nice place, a nice home. Everybody wants the same thing.
Johnny May was the one who kept coming back and saying, she was so nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bill.
Another item there in the chat from a past president, Bill Loveland, says Article 10 of the Code of Ethics provides a mechanism for recognition of fair housing violations. And remember, folks, that's one of the hardest things of our work, is that there's self-reporting. We're reporting of what's happening in front of yourself in the work that you do. And that's a very hard challenge. Sometimes that's a hard thing for people to go ahead. They see things going wrong, they see things going sideways, and they're not calling out what they see as going wrong or what is in violation. And that policing is necessary if we're to advance forward. So with that, Stephanie, you have any final comments?
I just want to say thank you again, and also everyone keep an eye out. Anastasia, she is our chair for the diversity committee, and we'll have some great things out. Another note, if you have not gone for this designation, the At Home with Diversity, you should do it. It's not just for the designation, but it's a great class. A great presentation. Every one of our board members and executive board members has that designation, and that was one of my big asks this summer, that they all go ahead and take that course and get that designation. So I highly encourage it.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate your time
Thank
and
you
all the energy you put into this.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all very much for listening. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and enjoy that great weather out there. Get out there, get some fresh air.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Heather, for your applause.
And for reminding me what day it is.
Who knows? Thank you.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.